So now we're going to solve question 20. This is from SAT number 10. And the question says, the passage indicates that compared to men, women behave in ways that are typically more something, and then we just choose the ways we think they behave differently. So to begin this, first thing we have to do, like with any other question, we need to find our text, right? Find our relevant text. And there's a couple ways to do this. So first, again, I don't have the whole passage up here. But there's two things we do. One is we can use what's called the question order rule, which basically tells us that whatever, basically that the order of questions and the order of questions matches the order of the text. So, for example, question 19, which I don't have here, references line 53, which tells us that it's more than likely that question 20 here is going to come after line 53. It's not perfect; it doesn't happen all the time, but for the most part, this is like generally true. And the other thing is just to pay attention to the last question in the text. So it's more likely that our text will be towards the end of the passage, and it turns out that it is. So this is a little snapshot of the end of the passage. So what we're going to do is we're going to look for a text that tells us about a comparison, right, between men and women and the way that they behave. So reading down here, we should notice this line here. So supposing women were to act upon the same principle of egotism, consulting their own inclinations, etc., what would be the consequence? The author says the annihilation of all moral and religious order. And it continues, so that every good which cements the bonds of civilized society originates wholly in the forbearance and conscientiousness of woman. So at this point, we should say that we've probably found the right area of where our text is, where our answer choice is, because here we have the author clearly comparing women, right, to men. Supposing women would act on the same principle of egotism. Here she's referencing kind of what comes earlier, talking about men. And she goes on to sort of compare the two of them. So we don't know exactly which text that SAT is going to highlight, but we should just note that basically she has a more negative view towards men right throughout the passage, talking about how they're operating on this principle of egotism, consulting their own inclinations, interests, and reason only. Then she basically says that if women were to do this, it would be the annihilation of all moral and religious order, and that every good that cements society together comes in the forbearance and conscientiousness of women. So anything that sort of hits on those themes is going to be our answer choice. So now we're in a good position. We can go through the answer choices for 20 and kind of just check out and see which ones work and which ones don't. So A says that compared to men, women behave in ways that are typically more suggestive of general dissatisfaction. So this one could seem plausible because the whole text is basically talking about how women are dissatisfied, or at least the author being dissatisfied with the political and social state of women because women are not given the education or afforded the same education as men to the same extent. The problem with this is twofold. So one, nowhere in the passage is this explicit comparison made between women being generally more dissatisfied and men not being dissatisfied. So nowhere is this explicit comparison made on this theme. Moreover, this is talking about general dissatisfaction, and the only dissatisfaction that would make sense would be a particular dissatisfaction with the state of their education. That's another thing that's wrong with this. And then finally, is just that the text that we chose, right? And of course, we don't know that this is our text, but if we follow the right guidelines and principles, we can be almost certain that this is our text, and it doesn't tell us about this comparison here. So for that reason, we can get rid of A. B says that as compared to men, women are enhanced by a desire for independence. So this is also plausible, although less so. Right? It's plausible because the author does talk about how women do desire independence. That's sort of the basic premise of the whole argument in the passage. But again, we don't see any explicit comparison anywhere in the passage between men and women wanting more desire for independence. If anything, it's probably argued that it's an equal desire. Moreover, again, in our text that we chose here, nothing about this comparison, so eliminate this one. She says beneficial to the functioning of society. Now, this looks like a good answer choice for two reasons. One is that it's pretty neutral, it's general, and those are the answer choices that we want. Beneficial is just a very generic word for good, functioning society. So basically just good for society. And it does match not only the passage, but the text that we chose. So she says every good which cements the bonds of civilized society, originates wholly in the forbearance and conscientiousness of women. So this is a good answer choice. Let's keep it. B says that as compared to men, women behave in ways that are more focused on the achievement of future goals. Again, maybe it's true, but it's not mentioned at all in the passage. The comparison is not made, and our text doesn't talk about it. So We can eliminate that one, which is going to leave the answer to C as our correct answer.